Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Hamid Adamu and today we are diving into some of the most exciting and powerful CSS properties that will completely transform your web pages from basic and flat to absolutely stunning and interactive web pages. We are going to explore three game-changing techniques: CSS transforms, advanced backgrounds, including backgrounds and patterns, and box shadows. But here is what makes this lesson special. We are not just learning isolated properties. We are building a complete real-world project step by step that combines all these techniques to create something truly professional that you'll actually see on modern websites. By the end of this video, you will have the skills to create smooth hover effects that make your websites feel interactive and alive. Okay, I strongly encourage you to code along with me throughout this entire tutorial. So open VS Code right now and follow every single step. That's absolutely the best way to really understand how these properties work together in practice. So without wasting much time, let's dive in and start creating some visual magic that will make your website stand out. So what exactly are CSS transforms? Think of transforms as a way to manipulate elements in a way to in space without like affecting the normal document flow. You can move, scale, rotate, and skew elements to create interactive effects that respond to user actions. The beauty of transforms is that they are hardware accelerated, meaning they perform smoothly even on lower end devices. Let me give you a practical example with this H1 heading first to show you exactly how transforms work in action. Okay, so we have our H1 element here, right? Let's move to the CSS. As you can see, it's just a simple heading with the text transform. Right now, it's positioned normally in the document flow, right? Let's add our first transform to a element and we will immediately see the effect of transforms. So select the element, give it a transform, translate x, yeah, 100 pixels. Okay, perfect. You can see how our heading moves exactly 100 pixels to the right from its normal position. The translate function is incredibly useful because it moves elements without affecting other elements around them. Now let me create a container to hold multiple transform examples so we can see different effect sites, right? So let's get back to our HTML. I'm gonna comment this out for now. Okay. Actually, let me leave it like that. Let me comment out the CSS. Okay. So I'm going to name our container the transformer. Okay. Let's select it. Basically, the transformer will be our flex container that holds all our transform demonstration boxes. Let's add CSS for our transform container to make it display properly. Okay, so yeah, transformer, correct, transformer, right? So make it a flex container. Okay, can you see what happened? So this is our container, right? Basically, now you cannot see it because there is nothing inside of it. Let me show you where it is right now. You see, there is nothing that is displaying so far. So let's add contents inside of it. Oops, I even missed the class. So let's see. Yeah, so this is our container. So this red line here, there is nothing inside, that's why it's displaying like that. Okay, but for now we use flexbox, right, to arrange items horizontally with nice spacing between them. The gap property, as you know, adds consistent spacing. Justify content centers everything, and margin adds vertical spacing. Let me add our first interactive transform box inside the container. So let's say a box dot let's say scale box. So we're going to start with scale. Okay, now you might notice that this div has two classes: the box for general styling that all our boxes will share, and scale box for the specific transform effect we want to demonstrate. So all the styles or the properties inside the dot box will apply to all of the boxes that has the class. Okay, and you will see that in action once we add another box. So let's go to our CSS and take the box class, give it a width of 120 pixels and height 2, give it some background color, sorry, yeah, so color white, and let's center the text. Okay, so these are the styles that we want all the boxes to have, right? So this just creates our box as a 120 pixel square with a nice blue background and white center text. The cursor pointer tells users it's interactive, right? So let's hover over it and you'll see the cursor, how the cursor will look, right? Can you see that? Okay, so the most crucial property here is the transition property. It makes transforms animate smoothly over 0.3 seconds. Without this transition, transforms happen instantly and look jarring and unprofessional. Now let's add the scale transform for our scale box. Okay, so it has a class of scale box like that. So we want the transformation to happen when it's hovered over. Okay, so like this, let's say 1.1. Okay, I'm using 1.1, which means 100% of the original size, right? Instead of 100%. That's just a 10% increase, right? I deliberately avoid bigger values like 1.5 or 2 because subtle effects look much more professional and polished. Okay, now let's check let's hover over our box and see what happens. All right, can you see that? So the box scaled, right? So to say the size increased to 110%, right? You can also decrease the size actually. Okay, so the default is 1, right? Nothing happened. So let's say maybe 0.8. Can you see that? So the size now decreases, right? So this is scale transforms for you guys. Okay, let me add another box to demonstrate rotation transforms. Okay, apart from scale, we also have rotate, right? So like this. Okay, let me copy the class from here actually. Can you see that? It automatically inherits all the styles that are inside the box class here, right? So we don't have to write the code repeatedly all the time. Now we just need to select the elements individually, right? Also this one too, you want the transformation to happen when it was hover over, right? When a user hover over it. Okay, let's say, sorry, not scale, rotate. And the thing with rotate is that you can rotate to the left, so clockwise and anti-clockwise, right? So let's try rotating clockwise and see. So let's check that out in our browser. Okay, that worked, right? So this is rotate. Now let's say we have 45 degrees. I don't want to try that, but it's not necessary, it's not used actually. It's not that it's not used, but why can you rotate your element like that? Okay, so actually let me leave this one. I want all the boxes to be feel alive. Okay, let me return it to 5, and let me show you another one. Okay, you can also make it rotate this side. Okay, can you see that? So it's now rotating to the left, right? Notice I'm using 5 degrees instead of something dramatic. So small rotations between 3 to 10 degrees look natural and elegant actually, while big rotations can be distracting and feel unprofessional. This subtle tilt suggests playfulness without being overwhelming, right? Now let's add another box for translation. Okay, so for moving objects around the x and y axis, let's add another box. Actually, let me just duplicate this one, and instead of rotate, I'll now say up. Okay, translate, right? So let's add it here and see. Okay, our box has a class of translate box, right? Here's the most popular translate effect in modern design. Let me show it to you. So you might have noticed we have used this one in our last project too, in the Visa Solutions Flexbox website that I created, right? So this one. So translate y minus 3 pixels. Actually, let's make it minus 5. Now try and guess what might happen now. So this, what this does is it moves elements. This property moves the element on hover, right? Move the elements up slightly. The negative values moves it up, creating the illusion that the element is lifting towards the user, right? I use -1 because small movements between 3 to 8 pixels look elegant and professional. Now let me show you the most powerful technique, which is combining multiple transforms together. Okay, so this is scale, rotate, and translate. Okay, so we can also actually, let me just show you the, let me combine it here. So box dot combined, right? Combined. Now let's combine multiple transforms together and see what happens. Okay, so let's scale it by 1.05, right? And let's move it up a bit by 3 pixels. So let's see what happened. Oops, as always I forgot to add the hover again. Damn. So okay, can you see that it combines a subtle scale increase with a small upward movement? When you change transforms, they apply from right to left. This combination, slight growth plus upward movement, is the most popular hover effect for cards, buttons, and interactive elements in modern web design because it feels natural and engaging. Okay, I hope you understand the basics of transforms. So these are the most used actually. So four, these three, sorry, right? And don't forget that we also have translate X. Okay, so instead of translate Y, I'm gonna say translate X. So let's check what happened. Okay, so it moved 3 pixels to the left, right? And we can also say should push it 3 pixels to the right. Can you see that? Okay, that's pretty much for transforms. Okay, now let's deep dive into backgrounds techniques. Backgrounds are one of the most powerful ways to create visual interest and establish hierarchy in your designs. We are going to start with simple concepts and build up to professional level techniques that you see on the most beautiful websites today. Okay, now let's start with the fundamentals. So we're going to start with linear gradient. Okay, apart from giving normal colors, right, as backgrounds, I've been using this linear gradient since even in our recent project, Flexbox project, so the Visa Solutions website, I used linear gradient for the hero section background, right? It's time we learned how it works. Okay, so you guys should also implement it in your codes. Okay, so a linear gradient creates a smooth transition between two or more colors in a straight line. This is your foundation for all gradient work. Okay, let's create a div with the class of gradient basic. Okay, right after the transformer. Let me format the codes. Okay, so let's create a div with the class of gradient basic. Okay, so basic gradient, right? So this is a div with a class of gradient basic, right? For our first gradient example, let's see how to create the most fundamental linear gradient. So let's add the most common linear gradient in this box. This is what you need to master first, actually. Okay, before adding before putting the linear gradient background, let's give it some styles. Okay, so select it by class, give it a width of say 300 pixels, height of 150 pixels, right? Okay, so now let's give it the background. Okay, so let's give it, actually don't worry for now, let me just write the code and I'll explain after I'm done with it. Okay, so 135 degrees for the direction, and then our first color should be some kind of a blue, sky blue actually. Okay, and the second color should be some kind of a purple or something like that. Okay, now let's make the text white. Okay, so this is our first gradient, right? This is our first gradient. Let me break down this linear gradient. So here, apart from the linear gradient, there is nothing you don't know, right? So the font weight, border radius, the flex box, you know all of this. So the first parameter in our linear gradient, which is this angle, right, is the direction. So it creates a diagonal from top left to bottom right, right? So this diagonal direction is the most popular in modern design because it's dynamic and interesting. The second parameter, which is our first color, is our starting color, right? And the second one is our ending color. So blue to purple gradients, they are extremely trendy right now. Okay, now let's add more control over exactly where our colors transition. This is where you start getting professional results. Okay, let's create another box for that. So another div actually. So let's say hero. Okay, so actually let me just duplicate this one because they have the same styles, right? I might also decide to do this like this. So instead of copying and pasting the code always, I'll just say grad. Okay, so this one here, grad. Okay, let's duplicate it and the second one should be gradient basic. Okay, yeah, so this is it. Okay, so let's focus on our gradient, hero gradient right now. So we just need to set the background, right? So the linear gradient only. So what I want to do right now is to show a gradient which is perfect for hero sections and call to action areas. Okay, let's add CSS for our hero gradient. Okay, this is what modern websites use for their main sections actually. Let me show it to you. So the background looks something similar to the first one. So I want the direction to be 135 degrees still, and the color should be the same as the first one, but our second color I'm going to use red. Okay, okay, so where is our element? Oh, sorry, I actually wrote all of the parameters outside. That was a silly mistake actually. Okay, yeah, you can now see our background. Let me give it some margin top, so to separate it from the box above. Let's give it a margin top of 3 rem. Okay, now notice that they are almost the same, right? It's just different color. Now let me show you something. Okay, can you see the difference? Actually the one on top half, the difference is not that much, so let me make it maybe pink. Okay, can you see the difference? I used 0%, 100% after the colors, right? So it gives you a precise control over where each color starts and ends, right? So the first color starts at the very beginning and the second one ends at the very end. This explicit positioning creates smoother, more professional gradients and lets you fine-tune exactly how the translation works. Okay, I hope you understand it. Now let me give you another example. So let's take it up to another level with multicolor steps. Okay, this creates more complex and visually interesting backgrounds. Let's get back to our HTML and create another box actually. Let's say multi-gradient right? So right now let me see. I want it to be like this. So the class should be multi-gradient, right? So let's give it some styles. The reason why it does not appear is that I set the color of the text to white, right? So right now if we could inspect this place, we will see it actually. Okay, can you see that? So this is the multi-gradient, but the text is white, so we cannot see it. until we add the background. Okay, now let's go ahead and do that. So background, linear gradient. I'm going to use the same colors that I used. Okay, so let me give it, I want the same angle again. Okay, and the same starting color. Okay, so this time it starts at 0%, right? Actually we're going to do 3 colors right now. Okay, so 764 PA2, right? And let's say this one should be 50%, so the middle color should be 50%, right? And the last column, let's give it, actually let me make red as the middle one. Okay, so red 50%. Okay, let's check that and see. Okay, wow, can you see it? We have 3 colors now, as you can see. So the blue at 0%, red at 50%, and the pink at 100%. So the middle color at 50% creates a beautiful transition point. This technique is perfect for creating sunrise sunset effects or brand gradients that incorporate multiple brand colors. Okay, so I think that's pretty much about gradients. Okay, actually let me show it to you on buttons. So let me show you button gradients. They are incredibly popular in modern UI design and show how gradients can enhance user interactions. So let's create a button in our HTML. Let me comment out these transforms. Okay, so let's say button dot grad button. Okay, let's say click me. So here is our button, right? Now let's select that button. Okay, let's give it a color of white, right? Let's remove the borders. Let's give it a padding of 12 pixels, top and bottom, and actually let's say 24 pixels left and right. Okay, right now it's actually hidden. I didn't add the background. Okay, so let's give it a border radius of 25 pixels and font weight of bold or 700. It's all the same. And let's give it a cursor of pointer and the transition effect. Okay, so this time let's say all instead of just transforms. So in the last couple of examples, as you can see, we use this one here. So we tell the transition to only transition for transformed elements, right? For transformed elements, but here I said all. So this indicates that every property of the button should be transitioned. So the colors, the font size and whatsoever. Okay, so actually let me add the background. Sorry. So linear gradient, and let's make this one 45 degrees. Okay, let's say 349 HDB, so blue color, right? And the second color should be this. Okay, alright, so these are colors, right? This is our button, so it creates a button with a 45 degree gradient from light blue to darker blue. Right now it's not that visible, but actually let me change the second color. Let's say blue. Okay, can you see that? So it creates the button with 45 degree angle gradient from light blue, as you can see, to darker blue, right? The 25 pixel border radius creates the popular pill button shape. Transition property is crucial for smooth interactions. Now let's add the interactive hover effect. Okay, so right now let's say grad button, right? So when a user hover over it, I want the background, I want the transform actually, so it should move up a bit, right? So translate y, so it should move on the x-axis a bit, right? Can you see that? Actually let me zoom it for you to see. Okay, so this is our button. You can see as we hover over it, it moved up by 2 pixels, right? Right, I think that's pretty much for backgrounds, and we have also combined some transitions and transforms into it also, right? And for the transitions, we are going to have a special video about transitions and animations, right? So after we have covered everything actually in CSS, because we need to cover the most important ones first. Okay, so before we move to the animations and transitions, I think it's the last or second to the last lecture we will do about HTML and CSS. Okay, so after it, then we do responsive web design, and boom, JavaScript next. All I need is your commitment, guys. You work hard, you practice, and get good at it. So I should not be wasting my time. Okay, now let me talk about box shadows. Okay, you have been seeing me using box shadows, right? Even in our latest flexbox project earlier, we used box shadows. Okay, so what are box shadows? Box shadows are absolutely crucial for modern web design because they create the illusion of depth and make flat designs feel three-dimensional and interactive. The key to professional shadows is understanding that they should mimic real-world lighting and be subtle enough to feel natural. Let me start with the most fundamental and widely used shadow in professional web design. Okay, so let's create a div with a class of shadow cat in our HTML. the shadow cut, right? Let me copy. Okay, actually let me comment out those so we see what we are doing. Okay, yeah, there you go. So let's say, as you can see, I created a class of shadow cut, right? I'll show you the exact shadow formula that 90% of modern websites actually use. So let's add the most popular shadow in modern web design, the standard cut shadow. Okay, so I've already copied the class. Let's give it a width of 200 pixels, height of 100 pixels, right? Let's give it a background of white actually. Okay, so let's give it a box shadow, right? So 0, 4, 6, and then okay, can you see that in our browser? Can you see how it looks like? Let me zoom it again for you. Okay, I hope you're seeing it. Now let's add some styles too before I explain what I'm doing. Okay, let's enter the text. So make it a flex container. You can see how much we use flexbox in day-to-day coding. So in CSS, I think it's one of the most used properties actually. So the display, flex, align items, justify content, right? Let's give it a font weight of bold. I don't like the look of this text actually. I don't like the font. So let me do my favorite font. So Poppins. Yeah. So font weight of bold. Let's give it some border radius. And the transition here, we need the box shadow property. Okay, so box shadow, and then 0.3 seconds is as usual. Okay, so let me break down this box shadow syntax. So the first value 0 is horizontal offset, right? So 0 means the shadow is directly centered horizontally. The second value, which is the 4 pixels, is vertical offset. This pushes the shadow 4 pixels down and creates the effect of light coming from above. Can you see that? So the third value, 6 pixels, which is blur radius. This softens the shadow edges. And finally, the last one, which is the RGB color, is black color with only 10% opacity, making it very subtle. This exact formula is used by Bootstrap, Material Design, and most major design systems. Let's add a professional hover effect. This is the best practice for interactive elements. Okay, so let's say our shadow cuts here. Let's say when someone hovers it. So let me copy this one. So when someone hover over it, it should be so let's change this to H and this one to 25. Okay, and I need the alpha to be 15, 0.15. Okay, so on hover I increase the vertical offset, as you can see, from 4 pixels to 8 pixels, and the below from 6 to 25, while making the shadows slightly darker at 15% opacity. Okay, let's hover over it and see. Can you see that? Wow, this creates the illusion that the element is lifting closer to the user. Let me hover over it again and you can see. Okay, like it's popping out of the web page, right, and lifting closer to the user. This is the most popular hover effect in modern web design and used by companies like Apple, Google, and Facebook. Now let me show you button shadows. This makes buttons feel tactile and professional. Okay, so let's add another button below. Shadow PTN, right? So let's say professional button, right? So let's style it here. So we are going to demonstrate the standard shadow approach that makes buttons look clickable and professional, right? So let's give it a background of, let's say, 349, that blue color. Okay, let's give it color. We need the text to be white. Remove the borders. Give it some padding. So border radius of 6 pixels, right? And let's bold the text. Let's make it interactive, and let's give it a box shadow. Okay, so the first parameter should be 0, 2 pixels, and then the blur radius 4 pixels, and then yes, this one. Okay, so let me add some margin between this element and others so we see it clearly. That's too much. Yeah, 2 will do it. Now let's add transition to it. So this time all of the properties again. Okay, for buttons, as you can see, I use a smaller shadow. So because buttons are typically smaller elements and don't need as dramatic shadows, the 2 pixel vertical offset and 4 pixel blur create just enough depth to make the button feel elevated without being overwhelming, right? So here is the advanced hover technique I'm telling you about. Let's do it. So our shadow BTN, when hovered over, should be, when the user hover overs it, then it should be, sorry, let me copy this one, right? So 4 pixels, and the blur radius, let's make it 12 pixels actually, and let's change this color values 52, 152, 152, 219, and then 0.3. Okay, let's also add transform. So I want it to move up by 1 pixels. Remember how we could do that? So we use the translate y. This time let's say -1. Okay, so let's try that and see. Okay, it's working perfectly. Now this is where it gets really sophisticated. You notice that I'm using black for the hover shadow, right? I'm using this black, which is the button's blue color with 30% opacity, right? So it creates a colored glow effect that's incredibly popular in modern UI design. With the 1 pixel upward, it makes the button feel like it's glowing at and lifting towards the user, right? Can you see that? Let me show you the most advanced shadow technique that professionals use. So layered shadows for ultra realistic depth. Okay, let's create a div with a class of, let's say, let's give it a class of shadow elevated. Okay, so this div will demonstrate how top-tier designers create realistic multi-layer shadows that look like real objects, right? Let's add CSS for elevated shadow. This is what high-end design systems like Google's material design actually use. Okay, let's get back to our CSS and then shadow elevated, right? Should be 200 pixels. Actually, I didn't write anything inside of it. Let's say elevated cut. Okay, yeah. So we need the height to be 100 pixels, right? Background should be white. So let's give it some box shadow. So 0, 1 pixel, 3 pixel, RGB, sorry, RGB. Okay, 0.12, right? So we can then add comma like that. Let's say 0, 1 pixel again, 1 pixel, 2 pixel for the blur radius this time, and then RGBA. So instead of 12, let's say 24. Okay, now let's center everything. Our old friend Flexbox. Right, border radius of 8 pixels. Let's give it a margin of 20 pixels, and transition should apply to all properties. That way we'll see what's happening, right? So as you noticed in the box shadow, it uses two separate shadows stacked together. The first shadow is sharp and close, right? it represents the direct shadow. The second one is softer and represents ambient shadow. This mimics how shadows work in real life actually. So this is it. This is our cat, right? There's always a sharp shadow close to the object and a softer ambient shadow. Now let's add a professional hover on this cat and see what happens. So hover, okay. So the box shadow is the first parameter should be 0, 14 pixels, and then 28 pixels with this. So 0.25, right? And the second one should be 0, 10 pixels, 10 pixels, right? And then RGBA. Okay, so what this does is the hover effect dramatically increases both shadows, right? The first becomes much larger and more blurred, while the second becomes more prominent. Now let's try it out and see. Okay, can you see that? That's really nice, right? This is really good actually. So it creates the effect of the element, as you can see, lifting significantly higher, right? I see that like it's lifting, right? This dual shadow technique is used by Google Material Design, Apple's interface guidelines, and most premium design systems because it looks incredibly realistic. So I think that's pretty much for box shadows too. You see how really powerful they are, right? So we have created these cards and cards, two cards and buttons to demonstrate how box shadows work. Now let's bring everything together into a comprehensive real-world project. So I'll create a product card that you'll actually see on e-commerce sites, course platforms, or portfolio websites. This card will use every single technique we have learned. Transforms for interactivity, gradients for visual appeal, and shadows for depth. First, let me create the complete card structure so you can see how everything fits together. Okay. Right now, I think I'm going to comment everything we have done so far. Okay. Well, actually, let me just create another folder for that. So inside of our transforms, let's say product card. Okay. So inside of the product card, let's create two files. So the index.html. Actually, let me name this one product.html, and then product.css, right? Now let's close our index files here, okay, and focus on the project. Let me hide the navigation. Okay, so let's say, so the title should be product card design. Okay, actually let me open this one afresh. Okay, so relaunch the live server. So product css. Okay, okay, so right now we created our two files, right? So let's add the html for this our product card. Right, so let's create a div with the class of product card. Okay, and inside of it, let's create the card header. Okay, so let's say product icon. Right, actually let me use some this thing for this. Okay guys, now I'm doing this just to demonstrate how real product cards work. Okay, so I just selected this emoji and I'm going to use it as the product icon. Okay, feel free to replace it with whatever you want. Okay, so let's create another div with the class of sell batch. Right, so let's say 50% off. Right, so this is for the cart header. Right, and let's create cart content. Okay, so let's make our header to be premium course, and let's say learn modern web development with hands on experience. Right, actually let me zoom out the web page. It's actually too much. Okay, there you go. So let's create a div with the class of price. So price, and let's create this span, say all price. Okay, so the all price is $199. Right, and the new price is, actually let's say 99. Right, so close that div, and right outside of it create a button with the class of buy. So buy button. Okay, so let's say buy now. Okay, so this structure gives us a card with a gradient header containing an icon and sell batch, plus content area with title, description, pricing, and call to action button. Now let's style each piece step by step. Okay, so let's start with our main product card header. So the product card container, and as always, let's zero our margins at first, paddings and the box sizing set to border box. Okay, so let's select the product card. Okay, so let me give this card a width of 320 pixels. Okay, and a background of white, so a white background, border radius of 15 pixels. Okay, overflow to be hidden, right? And box shadow. So the first parameter, 8 pixels, 0 pixels, 8 pixels, 25 pixels for the blur radius, and then RGBA. Okay, can you see that? So let's add a transition effect. So we're going to add the transition effect on all the properties. Okay, let's give it a margin of 2 rem, top and bottom, auto, left and right, so it centers everything, right? So as you can see, this creates our foundation, a 20 pixel wide, 320 pixel wide cut with generous border radius for modern rounded corners. The overflow hidden is crucial because it clips the gradient header to follow the rounded corners. I'm using a professional shadow technique with 8 pixel vertical offset and 25 pixel blur for sophisticated depth, right? Let's add the signature hover effect for our product card. So product hover transform. Okay, so this time it should move 8 pixels up, right? I also want the box shadow to be so this. Okay, so 0.15. Okay, so when the product card is hovered, the entire card lifts up 8 pixels and the shadow becomes much larger and more prominent. This creates an incredibly satisfying interactive effect that makes the card feel like a physical object, right? Let's check that. Can you see that? Now let's style our card header with a beautiful gradient background. Okay, so let's select the card header, give it a height of 200 pixels, and then background of linear gradient. So the one we've been using in our examples. Okay, so 0%. Okay, and then the second color should be this color, so this purple, right? Okay, let's center everything inside the card header. Okay, so let's give it a position of relative. Okay, so we need to position some things with absolute, right? So as you can see, the header uses a mastered gradient technique, so the 135-degree diagonal from blue to purple. The 200 pixels height gives us substantial visual space, The position relative is essential because we need to absolutely position the cell batch in the corner. So let's add CSS for our product icon. Okay. Let's add CSS for our product icon with a modern glass morphism effect. Okay, so select the product icon. I think yeah, product icon. Let's give it a font size of 4 okay. Don't worry about the bat. Actually, I just didn't find something that I could use, so it's not a problem. That's not our concern for now. Okay, let's give it a background of, let's say, RGBA 255 255 255 and then 0.2. Okay, so let's give it a width and height of 100 pixels each. So border radius of 50%. Okay, let's center everything. Display flex, align items center, justify content center. Okay, can you see that? So now the emoji is centered inside of the product icon, right? So let's add this property called backdrop filter. Okay, so let's add a blur of 10 pixels. CSS is really vast, so there are countless properties out there, right? And it's still updated every time. So box shadow, let's give it some box shadow. So 8 pixels, 32 pixels. Okay, so this creates a circular icon container with a frosted glass effect. The RGBA color, right? So the first background creates a semi-transparent white background, while backdrop filter creates the popular glass morphism effect by blurring whatever's behind it. So the shadow adds depth to make it feel elevated. Okay, let's add CSS for our cell batch now, which is positioned in the corner. So the 50% off. Cell batch, right? Yeah. So let's position it. So it's been a while since we used position. So let's give it a top of 15 pixels and right 15 pixels. Okay, and then background, right? Let's give it, let's say I want it to be the 45-degree diagonal, right? And then the first color should be FF6B6B, right? And the second color should be EE5A52, right? Let's give it a color of white. Okay, let's give it a padding of 8 pixels and 12 pixels. Okay, so our card is really coming to life right now. So let's give it a border radius of 0.8 rem. Let's bold the text. Okay, so 700. Actually, I don't like this font. I'm gonna change it. Okay, so inside of our body, let me give it font family. Maybe this time let me use Lato. No, let me use Poppins. Okay, so let me add box shadow for this one. Okay, so 0 pixels for the first parameter, 4 pixels, and then 12 pixels for the blur radius, and then this color 255, 107, 107, and 0.4. Okay, so the badge uses absolute positioning to float in the top right center, corner. So I'm using a red gradient to make it eye-catching, right? So the first thing the user sees, right, it kind of catch the eye of the user. So the 50% off is one of the ways of advertising, right? Uh, like I told you, it's eye-catching, and notice the shadows too. Uses the badge red color with transparency, right? It creates a colored glow effect that makes the badge really pop and feel important. Now let's style our card content area. So we are done with the card header, right? So for the card content, let's give it a let's say, right, let me give it a padding of 2 rem, so we have some space inside of it, right? So select card content, it's 3. Let's give it a margin bottom of 1 rem. Okay, let's give it some color. Okay, and this font size should be 1.4 rem. Yeah, so let's style the paragraph. So select the P. Let's give it this color. So 7F, 8C, 8D. Okay, so some kind of a light gray background color, sorry. So let's give it a line height of 1.6. Okay, let's give it a margin bottom of 2 rem. So the 2 rem padding, right, gives everything breathing room. So the heading uses a dark blue gray color that's professional but not harsh black. A paragraph with increased line height for better readability. Now let's add CSS for our pricing section. Okay, so select the price and display it to flex, right? Align items center, give it some gap of 1 rem. Yeah, so if you noticed, we have two span elements, right? So two inline elements inside of the price. So we have one for the old price and one for the new price. So let's select the old price. Old price. Let's give it a color of BDC 3C7. So some kind of a gray color, right? And the text decoration should be line through. So which means it's the former this thing, right? Former price, right? And the font size should be font size should be 1 rem. Okay, now let's select the new price. So the new price, give it a color of, let's say, E74 C3C. Okay, some kind of a coral color, right? So let's give it a font size of 2 rem. Okay, and let's bold the text too. So the pricing uses flexbox to align the old and the new prices horizontally. The old price is grayed out with strike through to show it's no longer valid. The new price is large, bold, and red to grab attention and create urgency. Right. Finally, let's create our call to action button that combines all our techniques. Okay. So select the buy button. Right. Give it a width of 100%. Okay. Give it a background of linear gradient. Right. So 45 degree, 349 8 dB, right? So our old friend, and the second color should be this one, 2989 0B9. Actually 2980 B9. Okay, so let's make the text to be white and border none, right? Border none, padding of 15 pixels. Okay, let's give it a border radius of 8 pixels. So you need to keep consistency for the border radius, right? Border radius 8 pixels. And the font size should be 1.1 rem. If you might notice, we have been using 1.1 rem for buttons since our last Flexbox project, right? So it's kind of keep consistency throughout do a page. Okay, now let's bold the text. Okay, and also let's make the button interactive by adding the cursor pointer, and this time again let's add transition effects on it. Let me give it some box shadow. Okay, so the box shadow should be 0 pixels, 4 pixels, and 15 pixels. Okay, okay, yeah. So the button, as you can see, takes full width and uses our blue gradient, right? So the shadow uses the button's blue color for that professional glow effect we learned about. Now let's add the final hover effect for our buy button too. Okay, so buy btn hover and transform. Okay, should move up by 2 pixels, right? Sorry, not x actually, translate y. So I want it moving on the y axis, not x axis. Okay, let's give it a box shadow. Okay, 0, 6 pixels, 20 pixels, RGB. Okay, so 52, 152, 219, and then 0.4 for the transparency or the opacity. So right now on hover, the button lifts slightly and the colored shadow becomes more intense. This creates perfect call to action effect that encourages clicks. Let's try it out and see. Can you see that? Right, there we have it. We have just created a completely professional product card that showcases every single advanced CSS technique we learned today. And more importantly, we now understand exactly how these techniques work together in real-world projects. Let me recap the key concepts we have mastered today. We have explored CSS transforms in depth, right? Scale for resizing elements smoothly, rotate for adding dynamic angles, translate for creating movement and lift effects, and how to combine transforms for sophisticated interactions, right? The absolute key with transforms is always including smooth transitions. Without them, your effects will feel jarring and unprofessional. We mastered advanced backgrounds too, from beginner to professional, right? We started with basic linear gradients, learned how to control color stops with percentages, explored multicolor gradients for complex effects, mastered overlay gradients for text readability, and we also created interactive gradient buttons. Remember that gradients should enhance your design, not overwhelm it, right? We also covered box shadows comprehensively, from basic single shadows with horizontal offset, vertical offset, glow radius, and color, to advanced multi-layer shadows that mimic real-world lighting. The secret to professional shadows is subtlety and using colored shadows, right? for interactive elements. And most importantly, we combined all these techniques into a real-world projects that you could actually use on a client website or your own projects. So this product card right here, okay. The key to using these effects professionally is restraint and purpose. Every shadow should add depth, every transform should enhance interactivity, and every gradient should serve the overall design goal. I strongly encourage you to take this code and experiment with it. Try different gradient color combinations, adjust shadow values to see how they change the mood. Experiment with different transform combinations to create unique effects. Change the card content, try different color schemes, adjust the sizing, and that's it. The thing is that the more you practice and play with these properties, the more natural and intuitive they will become. Remember, these aren't just cool effects, right? They are essential tools for creating modern professional websites that users love to interact with. Every major website uses these techniques because they make interfaces feel more engaging and polished. Alright, thanks for coding along with me today. If you found this tutorial helpful and learned something new, give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel reach more developers. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can never miss our latest CSS and web development tutorials. Drop a comment below and let me know what you would like to learn next. Okay? Keep practicing these techniques, keep experimenting, and keep building amazing things. Happy coding, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll take your CSS skills even further. So goodbye and happy coding.